Poe? What a brilliant and handsome man.
Poe!
My sweet husband, Eddie.
No, it didn't ring any bells, I'm afraid.
Poe! Yes, Poe! The genius.
You know he's nothing. He's not even that good of a writer. Not at all. No, I'm actually far superior. Just a lot of people haven't read my manuscripts.
You have to believe in Edgar.
He's a brilliant writer. You'll see.
The writing, well, I heard it's very dark and scary, which I love.
Degenerate,
Ingrate,
drunken,
bastard,
erratic,
disreputable.
foppish writer.
I mean, my God, Poe's a genius.
Poe is a paradox.
Edgar Allan Poe is embedded with this mystery, and we look at him as this dark and brooding figure.
Terror! Abandon the theater! Flee! If you value your lives.
We wanted tales of superstition, of horrible murders, black cats, telltale hearts, and he gave it to us.
You read Poe's stories and they're so dark and scary, but he had this very tender, sweet relationship with Virginia.
He has all these qualities that are very endearing. At the same time, he's also a person that couldn't control his appetites, that gave way to his passions.
Who is he really? How do the stories apply to his life? What did those stories mean to him?
Why does someone who works in one way so personally and so tenderly, why do they have this alternate persona that is so dark and so callous and so psychotic?
Some say that our tale is in the German style, but I say the terror is not of Germany, but of the soul. I am Edgar Allan Poe.
People tell me that Poe had a gambling problem. This is the way I explain it. When he went to college, John Allan, his dour stepfather, sent him to college with just enough money to get there. Gave Poe no money for the basic necessities. And here was young Poe with all of these rich guys, all these rich kids. And he gambled foolishly, hoping to earn some money to buy soap, to buy his books. And he got ripped off. He got cheated to the tune of about $2,000. That was a lot of money. However, that amount of money was not uncommon for that class of students, because if you went to the University of Virginia, your family had money. Poor people did not go there. So anyone else would just say, oh, my dad will pay you. So that's what Poe said. And when John Allan found out that Poe gambled and lost that kind of money, he took Poe out of college and basically said, that's the thanks I get. I send you to college, and what do? You gamble.
He helped Edgar out a lot. So John Allan has this conflict because look what I've given you, and he doesn't get the return that he feels is rightfully his.
When Poe returned to Richmond, he discovered that he was no longer welcome. John Allan was already courting someone. His first wife was still just about cold in the grave, and here he was, John Allan, chasing someone else. The last thing John Allan wanted was someone in his house who knew about his various affairs that he was having.
Edgar once called himself my son, and now he's an impoverished buffoon.
It was in the supreme madness of Carnival that I encountered my friend. Yes, let us be gone.
For the love of God, Montressor!
My heart grew sick. It was the dampness of the catacombs that made it so.
For the love of God, Montressor!
When Poe sat down to write a story, he did what a lot of writers do, brainstormed. And while living in Baltimore, he read stories about people that were being buried alive, accidentally, by doctors. or family members who couldn't tell when someone was dead. If you had a contagious disease and they thought you were dead, or if you were in a coma, not many people wanted to handle the body. So in their haste in getting people in the ground, especially if you had died during the hot summer months when the body would decompose faster, they would make mistakes and bury you alive. And Poe, probably thought, hey, this sounds pretty good. So he incorporated that theme in Berenice, and he saw the public reaction. So he used it again and again because people could relate to it. It seemed like everybody knew someone who lived next door to someone who was buried alive. Everybody had a story to tell. We would like to think of Poe sitting up in his attic with the light burning at midnight, writing these tales of horror coming out of his imagination. But many of these stories are based on actual occurrences. The public was shocked, disgusted, outraged by the subject matter, but they liked reading about it.
My answer is a precise summary of my opinion of your intelligence.
Poe's criticisms were so savage that he earned the nickname the Tomahawk Man because of his brutal, slashing reviews. If you found out that Poe was going to review one of your stories, you were like, oh, please let him say something nice about it. Because if he said it was awful, nobody bought it. And as a result of these criticisms, he created a lot of enemies, because sometimes he would not only savage the work, but the person who wrote it. And one of these enemies was a person called the Reverend Rufus Griswold.
There's so many things that Edgar Allan Poe has that Griswold wants. He wants the fame, he wants the acclaim. More importantly, I think he wants the talent that Edgar Allan Poe has. Because I think Griswold was talented in his own right, but he was never what Poe was. And he wanted that.
Apparently, Rufus Griswold had an ego the size of a Mack truck. And he was the kind of guy that couldn't take any kind of criticism, even the slightest criticism. He would really become upset. So he approached Poe and basically said, would you review my current anthology of poems? So what did Poe do? He gave it a okay review. But because of those few words of criticism, Griswold hated Poe.
I see you have Poets and Poetry of America. Oh, all the greats are in here. Wordsworth and Lowell and Poe.
Yes, well, I wrote the book, and you can clearly see that Poe is in the appendix, where he belongs. He is manipulative, and he's out for his own self-interest, but at the same time, he desires the affection that these protagonists that he's supposedly against can give him.
Unfortunately, Poe is a very poor judge of character. And even though people were saying, Eddie, do you know what Griswold is saying about you? He's saying these horrible things about you. His response was something like, oh no, not Griswold, we're friends. He would never say anything like that.
That he was his best friend, that he was his Christ to Griswold's Judas.
I've had, over the years, too many people ask me, was Poe a dope addict?
If you go to the Poe House in Baltimore, one of the things they're very heavy on is Poe didn't have a drug problem.
It was about 15 years ago at the Poe House. This professor came in with his class, and he wanted to give them a tour of the Poe House. And as he's talking, I'm going, oh, so far so good, until he said, it is proven that Poe took LSD. And while he was hallucinating, he would write these fantastic tales of horror. And I'm sitting there going, what? LSD? People think that Poe took opium, morphine, LSD, which wasn't created until the 1920s, and every drug imaginable. Poe's opium supposed use came from people like Rufus Griswold and people that hated Poe. Now, did Poe use opium at other times for medicinal reasons? Probably. Was he addicted to it? No way. There's no proof that Poe was addicted to any drugs.
Drink. Sadly, neither sobriety nor chastity can be counted among his scant virtues.
Was Poe an alcoholic?
It looks like he just was a basic alcoholic. I mean, nothing unique about that.
A term that would fit him better would be a problem drinker. A problem drinker is the kind of person that can drink a glass of wine and they're all over the place. They can't handle the alcohol. This hits Poe right on the head. He was the kind of person that would drink a small amount of wine and it would go right to his head. He would act as if he had drank the whole bottle. It's obvious he had a problem with alcohol, but yet there are times in his life where he would go periods without drinking. And then he would have that one drink and that would do him in. When Virginia was coughing up blood, knowing that she would die, he turned to alcohol with devastating effects. After her death, he just abused alcohol. There's some evidence that Griswold got him drunk on purpose.
But how will we get him to sign it?
Vino.
Cheers.
You also have to remember that Poe was raised in the South, where drinking was expected. If you had a friend visit, you would drink a toast to that friend, and you had to accept, you had to do this. And if you didn't, it was an insult. He knew he had a problem, but I think with his Southern manners, he didn't want to offend people, and he would just think he could handle it, and he couldn't.
Surely something as simple as can't handle drinking is not big enough to take down this godlike character of Poe. But yes, it is.
Oh God, can I not grasp them with a tighter clasp? Oh God, can I not save one from the pitiless wave? Is all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream?
Tuberculosis, or consumption as it was called in Poe's time period, was a horrible way to die. You either died quickly or you lingered for many years. Poe's brother Henry died of tuberculosis. His mother died of tuberculosis when he was just a very young child. His stepmother died of tuberculosis. And of course his wife Virginia died of tuberculosis. I believe she started coughing blood when she was around 18 years old. And when Poe saw that, he knew she was dead. It was only a matter of time. There were times when she would try to sing or raise her voice and she would hemorrhage. And what must have went through his mind knowing she could die, she could bleed to death, she could drown in her own blood, and what kind of effect that had on him emotionally, I can only imagine. So she finally died of tuberculosis at age 24. And when she died, he had a complete breakdown. I mean, he loved her. I mean, there was no doubt. People that hated Poe, they could gossip about everything about his life, but no one, not even Rufus Griswold, who hated Edgar Allan Poe, not even Griswold could say anything about Virginia, because it was common knowledge that they loved each other and they were devoted to each other, and everyone knew it. Ultimately, when Poe died unexpectedly, Griswold seized the opportunity and wrote this really vicious and nasty obituary about Poe, where he created situations in Poe's life that never existed. He took out an excerpt from this book called The Caxtons, where the character in this book, fictional, was being described as this crazed lunatic, walking into streets at night during the rain, cursing the skies. And Griswold said, Poe was pretty much like this guy. And at one point, he removed the quotation marks. So when they were through reading that, they thought, well, this was Poe. However, This backfired. It created a sensation.
Did he do that out of spite, or did he do that out of love for Edgar? Did he know that was the only way to make Edgar Allan Poe live forever?
Poe wanted to create that image. He really was creating a persona of himself to sell, so that his work is all part of this master scheme of selling who he was to everyone. And he's completely aware of all of this. He's doing it almost in a hipster ironic way, in the sense that in real life, he doesn't interact with his wife this way. He plays games with her. They play hopscotch. He's very loving and tender with his mother-in-law. He does all of these touching and tender things which don't exist in the version of Poe that the public has been presented with.
A poet, a scholar, an athlete, a military man, a genius, they said.
We may have exaggerated a bit.
Fill his life with as much mystery as his stories were, and people will never forget him.